When I won Angler of the Year that year, we fished 9 tournaments, and 5 of the 9 were lakes that I had never been to. So this is where, back 2008 or whatever, I mean, I would go pre-practice for 4 or 5 days, a week maybe, and try to learn that lake and try to really get dialed in when I was there pre-practicing. And we have a 30-day off-limits period, and some of the best pre-practices I ever had ended up being the worst tournament you could ever imagine. You think you're dialed in, you think this, and even I think FLW might have went to a 2-week off-limits at one time. And I really get dialed in and said, man, I'm going to catch them off of this spot here, and then I'm going to go here. And then when we go back to practice for a couple of days, I don't even touch those because I know they're there. Man, these fish, like everybody's talking about, sonar, these fish are constantly on the move. They ain't there all the time when they were there 2 weeks ago, especially a month. A lot goes on in a month. And, you know, just try to get acquainted with the lake. If you can get acquainted with that lake, I touched on it a little bit earlier, knowing how to get around, knowing how to drive from one boat ramp to the other, knowing how to get around on that lake, and then knowing what the lake offers. I think I rode to St. John's River that year. We'd never fished there, and this was my first bass tournament. I went to St. John's River, and I drove all the way down there. It was an 8-hour drive, and I put the boat in. I rode around. The next day, I got up at daylight and filled the boat up with gas, and I rode till I was scared I wasn't going to make it back to the ramp with gas. Rode all day, just riding and looking. And I marked stuff. There's lily pads here. There's laydowns on this bank. Here's good creek channels. And you just make mental notes. I think I probably fished about 15 minutes in a day and a half. Didn't catch a bass. Ended up finishing 4th place in that tournament and catching the fish in places that I marked a month ahead of time. Just by knowing I get a bite somewhere, I know where a lot more of it is. I can go run with it. I went to Winyah Bay, and it was flooded. Never been there. It was 20 foot high or whatever. I rode. My wife went with me, and I'm riding intercoastal waterway in my bass boat, and we got dolphins jumping beside the boat. I mean, it was the craziest thing I've ever seen. You're out there trying to catch bass, and dolphins are riding with you. But I didn't fish there. I rode for 2 days, and it's a massive amount of water to look at. But I remember I started just idling up the Cooper River a bunch when I got into the area that, you know, I had done all my study from the previous time that bass had went there. I'd done all my study on Google Earth, and I knew where these rice fields were, and I started just idling, looking at things, and it was low tide. And I seen there was only like 3 places that I found. It was a bunch of coontail points that stuck out off the main channel, and I marked them really good and put waypoints on them. Well, day 4 of that tournament, I lost that tournament by 7 ounces or 9 ounces. I finished second. But day 4 of that tournament, I pulled up on one of those that I never had a bite on because I'd been fishing backwater because the fish were spawning, but we had a super low tide, and the fish, I thought may have pulled out or something, pulled up on those points and caught a 6-pounder off one of them. And I said, dang, I know where another one is. Crank up and run straight to it, and on the 3rd cast, I catch a 5-pounder on it, and I almost win the tournament. So it's all about getting acquainted with that lake, knowing as much as you can. If you spent 4 or 5 days there, it might even help you more. But we have to break it down and get more efficient with our time. So, and like I said, don't get locked in on patterns. That's for one thing that really has hurt me in the past. And went back in my younger days, I'd catch a bunch of fish when I went in pre-practice. I might spend 3 or 4 days, and I fish most of the time instead of riding. I think that riding deal, I used to make fun of some of the guys, or I didn't make fun of them, but I'd say, man, that guy's crazy. He's going all the way to Okeechobee, and he ain't even taking a fishing rod. He's just going to ride around for 2 days. Pretty much what I do now. I drove down there last Wednesday. It went off limits on Sunday. I left my house at 4 on Wednesday. I drove to the north end. I think it's about 10 hours. I put the boat in at 3 o'clock. It took me 11 hours. And I rode till dark. Didn't even get a rod out. The next morning, I got up from 7 in the morning till dark, and then I came home.